have a story to share with you, but it's a story you've already heard of, I'm sure. And this story has to do with something I'm going to share a little bit afterwards, and that is, you all know what the next holiday is, right? What's the next? New Year's. And what do most people do when New Year's comes around? Yeah, we make resolutions. And yet, here's the interesting thing. Very few people keep their resolutions, do they? Yeah, I remember I joined a gym back in 2000. Yeah, it was 2000. And I didn't join the gym over New Year's, but I joined the gym, I think it was the summer before. And when I joined the gym, I realized very quickly when New Year's came around, suddenly the population at the gym grew exponentially. There were all these people. I had known everybody at the gym. We kind of all knew who each other was. And then all of a sudden, what happens? All this influx of people comes in January 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and so on. And then, as I was talking with some of my fellow comrades at the gym, I noticed that they all had the same thing to say about the new people that were coming. They said, oh, by March, they'll all be gone, and it'll just be us again. Sure enough, each month, what happened? The numbers kept dwindling and dwindling and dwindling until about March. It was just the old crew at the same as it was before. And so that got me fascinated with this idea of like, why don't we keep our resolutions when we make them? Why doesn't it stick? And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But I do want to talk using the story of the Titanic, and I know many of you have heard the story, but one of the things that was mentioned, a man by the name of Richard Corfield, he said, no one thing sent the Titanic to the bottom of the North Atlantic. Did you know that? Rather, the ship was ensnared by a perfect storm of circumstances that conspired her to her doom. Such a chain is familiar to those who study disasters. It is called an event cascade. Here's the thing, though. In psychology, we also have a term called cascading events. And when we see these event cascades, we see that there are many things that led to the fall of the Titanic or the crash or the downward direction of the Titanic. And these are just some of the things, most of the things that happened. But the first thing was the climate. Did anybody know that the climate was different than typical for that time? It was actually a little bit warmer than it was usually. Another thing was the tides. The tides were unusual at that time as well. The speed of the Titanic, does anybody remember? Was it going faster or slower than normal? It's going a lot faster than normal. Also, the Titanic took a wrong turn. Now, this isn't like it was going in the wrong direction, but it took a turn because what happened right when they saw the iceberg? They tried to veer away from it or go around it. And actually, when they did some of the, after studies of what happened, they realized they would have fared better if they just hit it straight on. Another thing that happened was there were a lot of warnings that were unheeded. So they were told, but they had turned off their radios. They didn't want to hear anything. They just wanted to keep going forward. Also, there were a locked pair of binoculars. So there was a locker that the binoculars were in, and nobody could find the key. And so those guys up on the, it wasn't a mast, but whatever they call it up there, their crow's nest. Yes, thank you. They weren't able to look with binoculars, so they would have seen a lot further if they had had those binoculars. The reverse thrusts were also an issue. And this one was new to me, but the rivets that had been used for the boat or the Titanic were compromised. They weren't pure. They had, it's kind of like if you get gold and it's not pure gold, you're compromising the gold. And the same with the rivets. They had used some cheaper rivets that were different metals in there and not so good, so they compromised the structure of that. 9, most of us have heard this one, there were too few lifeboats. That was a big one. And they actually let the lifeboats go out before they were full too. The portholes were open, so that let in a lot more water too. And then there was also a fire on the hull. So this is what we call an event cascade or a cascading event where, it's not just one thing. And this is the case in our lives too, because how many times when we see something happen in our lives, is it just one thing that happens? It can be multiple things. And I think this is why we're told to be sober and vigilant in the Bible, because so often we might be looking at one thing in our life, but we forget the other things that might lead to this too. And so I want to share with you a client of mine that I had, and I want to share with you the event cascade that happened in this person's life. So the first thing that my client shared, well, it wasn't the first thing that he shared, but when we went back over his history, this is the first thing that happened in his life. Number 1, his parents didn't raise him knowing the peace that comes from having a relationship with God. What happens when we start out our lives and we don't know that? That becomes a big step in our cascading event. 2, he grew up in a home with a deficiency of good values and lifestyle habits. 3, he adopted the values of media and his peers. 4, he developed a freedom mindset with goals to match. Anybody read the lesson for this week? One of the things that I thought was really beautiful in the teacher's notes, it talked about how unchecked freedom leads to bondage. And unfortunately, our society wants freedom at all costs, which means what winds up happening? Bondage. You cannot have unchecked freedom without bondage. And then he started living paycheck to paycheck because of that. Then he started drinking and doing drugs to feel better. That's part of that unchecked freedom. Then he chose friends and a life partner who also used. Then his life partner had depression, anxiety, not that he didn't too, but she especially had it, and she was drinking more and more to cope with that depression and anxiety. And so he drank to keep up with his partner and his friends as well. And then, unfortunately, his wife overdosed. And then he had a friend who died of complications due to poor lifestyle habits. And then he finally admitted he needed help, but help was expensive and it's hard to take time off due to lack of finances. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have the luxury of saying, okay, I'm going to take some time out to get better. And then unfortunately, what do you think he said? Why is God allowing this to happen to me? And it's one of the most painful things as a therapist to watch these event cascades happen in people's life. They don't necessarily realize how they got there. But at the very end of all of those things, for a person to say, why is God letting this happen to me? And what would you say in that situation? Would you dare say, oh, you let this happen and this has been, that's very hard to say. You don't want to say that, especially when somebody's going through a hard time. So you have to be patient and then you have to work through some things. And eventually, yes, the enemy has done this. But I think what's really important in all of this is that we recognize the little things do add up. They don't seem so little in the moment when we're making that choice. But when you think about it, every deviation from north, where does that take you? A lot further away from north than you wanted. So when we have to make these changes in our lives, when we see the things that are happening and we want to make changes, one of the things that we have to recognize is that when you first start out, you are going to be what we call unconsciously incompetent. And a lot of us are at that place. Why is this happening to me? What does that reflect? I don't know what's going on. I don't recognize that there's something that I'm doing or something that I'm partaking in that is leading to this situation. But just like the iceberg that the Titanic hit, we have a picture that we can look at too when it comes to this idea of unconsciously incompetent. So, how much of the iceberg is under the water? Most of it, yes. And so the top part of the iceberg is what we would call the conscious state. Every single one of us, I would imagine, is conscious of the fact that I'm standing up here and speaking to you. Hopefully this is what you're focused on. And so you're conscious of it. This doesn't mean conscious versus knocked out, that kind of thing. This means the things that you're aware of, the things that are at the forefront of your mind, that's what we would refer to as the top of the iceberg. But underneath the iceberg is what we would refer to as the unconscious part, or you could also call it the subconscious part. And something that would be subconscious to all of us would be, well, not to me because I'm thinking of it, but and shortly it won't be to you, but it is right now. What is your name? Now, what was that information before I asked you? It was subconscious or unconscious to you. It's there, but you're not thinking about it. And as soon as I ask the question, now you're aware of it. Just like if I said, how old are you? Your brain is storing that information somewhere back there, but you're just not conscious of it. And many of the things that we're doing in our lives, we're subconscious or unconscious of those things being there, but they're not at the forefront of our minds. This is why, many years ago, there was a graduation speech that went viral. Does anybody remember the speech that the Navy captain gave at a university? What the topic was? Yeah, making your bed. But why did he give a whole speech on making your bed? Does anybody remember what the point of the speech was? Okay. The making of the bed is the first thing you accomplish in the morning. Now, some of us could say our devotional time or something like that. But what happens when you make your bed in the morning? It sets the tone for the rest of the day. And so you're starting off with a success, you're starting off with an accomplishment. And what he was trying to say is when you have that accomplishment or that success and it's stored in the unconscious, what happens? Then you're building off of that the rest of the day versus if you don't do it. I remember, it was 2015. I had just moved to Northern California to start my job. I moved into this condo, and I'd never seen the condo before, but my friends saw it and they picked it out for me, and I could see some pictures, and so I agreed with it. But one of the things I found out very quickly when I moved in, there were no lights in the living room. Like none whatsoever. So I had moved all of my stuff into this living room, and I moved in the early part of March, and so the sun was going down about the time I got home from work, so I had no lights to use to unpack. So what this unconscious nagging of like all these boxes and everything that were still unpacked, I didn't want to go home at night. So I was like, I don't want to see a mess. So I'd find other things to do to distract myself. So I didn't do it because I didn't want to go home. But all of us, when we have these unconscious things, they build and they affect us and they wear on us. And so unconsciously incompetent, it means we don't know or even recognize the deficit except it's there. And sometimes we call this ignorance is bliss. Are we really in bliss though? No, it's just that we don't know what we have to do yet. And so the bliss is like, oh, I'm not responsible for this. This is just happening to me, right? So then the next stage of change is what we call consciously incompetent. Now, this is a hard stage to be in because now all that stuff that we haven't been thinking about, now I'm aware, all of my stuff is in the living room and I have to deal with it. I know what I need to do. A lot of us, we know what we need to do after that initial stage. And so what does this stage equal? Guilt. How many of us like to feel guilty? We don't. I do a whole talk on guilt, though. Guilt is actually not a bad thing. God created it to keep us on track. The Bible tells us that when Adam and Eve sinned, God created enmity, right? What would happen if we didn't have enmity with the bad things that we do? We would just continue to do them and they would affect us. God didn't give us guilt so that we would beat ourselves up with it. He gave us guilt so that we would do something. That uncomfortable state that we're in should cause us to do something to get back on track. So it's like a faithful friend that tells you the truth about things. But here's the thing. When you feel guilt, can you go backwards to the previous stage of being unconsciously incompetent? Now, short of a frontal lobotomy, no, you cannot go back to that stage because now you know that you're doing something that you need to change. So no, we cannot go back. So what do we have to do? We have to go to the next stage. We have to go to consciously competent. Now, as uncomfortable as consciously incompetent is, what's more uncomfortable is to be consciously competent. Because consciously competent, what does that mean? That nice 4-letter word. I got to do the work. I don't like doing the work. How many of you love to do the work? Hopefully you're learning to like the effects of it at least, but many of us do not like at that point where we know, okay, I have to do something different. We don't like doing the work. But there's something beautiful that comes with it, but I'll get to that in a second. A lot of times when we get to this work stage, there are some myths that go along with this. And one of the myths is, I have to wait till I'm motivated. Do you ever think that? Like, well, I'll do it when I'm motivated, or I don't feel motivated right now, so I'll wait until I feel motivated. So there is a book called The 5-Second Rule. And she says in this book, Mel Robbins, she says, motivation is actually the effect, not the cause. A lot of people are waiting to feel motivated. You will never feel motivated if you're waiting for it. What does that mean? It's only by moving that motivation is possible. It's actually when you move that the motivation comes. And why is that? Because when you do work, there's something beautiful that happens in the body, and it's called dopamine. And one of the only ways to get dopamine is to work first. And when you work, you get dopamine. Now, here's a verse that tells us about this too. In 2 Corinthians 8, verse 11, it says, now therefore perform the doing of it, that as there was a readiness to will, we often have to use willpower in order to do the doing of it, so there may be a performance also out of that which ye have. So the more you work, the more you do it, the more you'll feel motivated to do that. There's also another myth, though. You're either motivated or you're not. So some people go, oh, those people over there, they're motivated to do it. I'm not motivated to do it. Do you think that's true? I already told you it's a myth. So, did you have a question? Well, we'll find out not everybody's motivated by the same thing, too. Some people are not motivated by money solely. It is helpful that, we can get money out of doing certain work. But have you ever met somebody who does work that doesn't get any money for it? What do we call that? It could be volunteering. What's another thing we could call it? Missionary, huh? Slavery. How about a hobby? There are things that, do you know nobody pays me to do puzzles? I love puzzles. I love puzzles so much that I don't even do them sometimes because I know I will be sucked in and consumed by it. It becomes almost an obsession to me. I'll go, okay, I'm just going to do one more piece before I go to bed. And then I can't find that piece, but I find another piece. And then I'm like, oh, cool, I found this piece. Oh, I still want to find the other one, though. I said I was going to wait until I found that one. Oh, I found another one, though. And oh, man, it's crazy. But I love doing that. Nobody needs to pay me to do it. I even pay to buy puzzles to do it. I don't get paid for it, but there is an immense satisfaction. I hope everybody can find something that gives them that satisfaction. But that's work that we do without pay. But the fact is motivation isn't a personality or character trait. Everyone is motivated. Did you know that? We're all motivated. You just have to figure out what motivates you. Sometimes we're looking at the wrong things to motivate us. Some people are motivated by money, and that's fine if that's your motivation. But some of us are motivated just by accomplishing something and growing in the process, learning how to do something that we haven't learned how to do before. So there's one more myth. I have one more here. Rewards increase all kinds of motivation. Do you know not everybody is motivated by the same rewards too? Different kinds of motivation are effective in different contexts. So some people are more intrinsically motivated, things like a passion or interest or curiosity to learn something, and other people are more extrinsically motivated. So if you have children, this would be a wise thing to take note of. How are your children motivated? Are all your children the same? If you have more than one child, you'll probably notice your children are not all motivated the same way. Some of them, you can give them rewards and they go, yay, this is the only way I'm going to do it. Other times your kid will do it and you're like, don't even have to ask them. You're like, wow, why does this kid do it? Because they're intrinsically motivated. They just have the joy of doing those sorts of things. Actually, I do have one more, I believe. Motivation is enough for success. Did you know that you can be motivated to be successful, but that's not necessarily enough to be successful? According to the book, The Motivation Myth, the fact is skills and strategies beyond motivation are required to be successful. So there are a lot of social media influencers that just want to be rich and famous and that sort of thing. They're very motivated. But if they don't have skills, if they don't learn how the system works, then they're not going to learn, or they're not going to be successful. And the ability to learn skills and build competency matters. So you have to actually know what you're doing when you do it. And one of the things that Jeff Hayden says, as he talks about this in his book, is he talks about 3 different steps. One is set up or ask a pro and follow their plan. So say, for instance, does anybody want to run or something this year, like maybe a marathon or a half marathon or a triathlon or something like that? So what do? This was one of the examples that he used. He talked about find somebody who's already done it and then specifically ask them, what did you do? And then the next one is to follow the plan. Don't think about anything else. Just do exactly what they tell you to do. If they're a professional at it or an expert at it, do what they've done. And then just follow that plan. Forget the goal. Don't even think about the goal. And then he says this, anybody can do anything for 2 weeks. If you know what to do, just do it for 2 weeks, and you can do that. I like what Carol Dweck says. She wrote The Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. She says, we like to think of our champions and idols as superheroes who were born different from us. We don't like to think of them as relatively ordinary people who made themselves extraordinary. And how did they do that? Do you like to hear that somebody just like you did something exceptional? You want to think, oh no, they're different. They had some extra human power to do it. Think of another way of looking at it. Sometimes when people want to lose weight and they see somebody has lost weight and that person, they're like, how did you lose weight? What do they really want? They want you to say, I got surgery, I took a pill, and it took it all off without me having to do anything. What we don't want to hear is, oh yeah, I followed this diet for 6 months or a year or something like that, and I did this exercise program, and I was committed to it an hour a day every day. We don't want to hear that. Why? Because it means work. So when you learn how to do the work, or you get to the work stage, can we go backwards at this point? Can we go back to just knowing what we need to do? Yes, we can. But here's the problem. If you are at the work stage and you go back, what happens? Not only will you feel guilt, but what does that guilt turn into? Now it turns into depression and anxiety because I know what I should be doing and I'm not doing it. And it just builds the guilt and builds the guilt. And I'm not saying everybody who has depression and anxiety has it because they know what they should be doing and they're not doing it. But I meet a lot of people. In fact, I have helped a lot of people. And they come back later and they go, Amanda, I don't know what's going on. I was feeling so good after I did your group, or I was feeling so good after I did this program, or I was feeling so good after we did therapy, and now I don't know what happened. What do you think I say when they come back to me? I don't go, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't know what happened. Do you know what I do? I start asking questions. I say, are you doing this still? Are you doing that still? Are you doing this? What about that? And then what do you think they do? Yeah, I wasn't doing that, but I was feeling so good. I didn't think I had to do it anymore. And I say, well, here's the thing. We have to keep doing those things if we want to get the same effect from it. You can't stop doing something and expect the effect to keep going. So we cannot do that. We cannot go backwards, or we don't want to go backwards because we want the dopamine that comes from doing the work. But here's the thing. There's actually 4 stages. And if you're willing to commit to doing the work, what happens? You become unconsciously competent. What is unconsciously competent? Yeah, you don't have to think about it. It becomes a habit. Think about, do you remember the first time you drove a car? How stressful was that? Do you remember the first time you tried to merge onto the freeway? Or merge into another lane? Do you remember how stressed you were at that? How many people here today drove here? How many of you were stressed out trying to merge into another lane? How many of you even remember driving here barely? That is the reward from doing the habit. When you stick with something long enough, you don't have to think about it anymore. It becomes a part of your life. In fact, do you know that even if you're in a bad situation right now, all of the things that you're doing are because you've been doing them so long, you're unconsciously competent at them. Do you have to think, maybe you have an issue with sugar? Do you have to think about going to the cupboard and grabbing the sugar, or going in the freezer and pulling out the ice cream? It's a habit. You've made it a habit. So what does it mean? If you want to change, you have to change and make a new habit out of it. So as we think about this, we want to understand that everything that we're doing involved these stages of change. But so if we want to change what we're doing, we have to change the things that we're doing now to do something different until that becomes a habit too. But that is the reward that happens. But still, you might be thinking, but I'm different than other people, or I struggle more with this. A lot of people are asking, can my brain change though? Maybe my habits could change, or I could start doing this, but can I really change? Well, there's an answer for you. There is something beautiful called neuroplasticity. What is neuroplasticity? You just take that first part, neuro, that has to do with your brain. The plasticity, that just means that your brain is changeable. Anytime you hear people say, well, I was born this way. Yes, you absolutely were born this way. But do you know what we often forget? Is that even inside of the womb, we are developing. And the things that we go through in the womb connected to our moms are having an effect on our brains too. This is a lot of research is going into what happens even before you're born, those 9 months that you're in the womb. That has to do with our neuroplasticity. So all of us, we're changing to become what we are. And even when you take pictures of people's brains, it doesn't tell you how that brain has always been. It only is a snapshot of where the brain is right in this moment. I see lots of those, those brains on drugs pictures. That doesn't tell you what the brain looked like before the person took drugs. All it tells you is what the brain looks like on the drugs, or what the brain looks like in that moment, not on drugs. It doesn't tell you the not on drugs brain if that person was using drugs for a time, got off drugs, 20 years sober, and now that's what their brain looks like. It doesn't tell you that. It's just a snapshot. It's just a picture. But there's two ways that our brains change. One is structurally. You can actually change the way your brain looks. So the structure of it. So what does that mean? Just like when you change your body, like you lose weight or gain weight or build muscle or something like that. Does your body not look different? Absolutely. But it also changes the function of your brain too. Neuroplasticity can change the function of your brain. And so the way your brain works even can change. So people go, oh, I could never change. This is how I am. That's not true. By the way, I tell my clients all the time, do you know how depressing it would be as a therapist if neuroplasticity did not exist? I'm sorry. Actually, the sad thing, when you listen to depression medication commercials and anxiety medication commercials, they actually give you this idea. Because they'll say, yeah, you're dealing with depression. Here, take this medication. And then the person's like, afterwards, you don't see like this actual joy and peace in their life. It's more like okay, I'm going through the motions. Thanks to the medication, I can do this. But I can tell you, even as a therapist, I work with people all day, every day. I see people go off their medications because they do lifestyle things that change not only the structure of their brain, but even the function of their brain. And that is why I'm not depressed. Because if all I could do was tell people, I'm so sorry, you're going to have depression or you're going to have anxiety the rest of your life, let's just get you comfortable. Do you know how depressing that would be? I would need a therapist. I could not do that. But there are some ways that we can actually see how our brains change. So one of the ways that we see how our brain changes, do you see that picture of the boy? What is he doing? What did your parents tell you when you did this? Did you ever have a parent? They said, don't slouch, and what did they say? Sit up straight. Did you know that there's a neuroplastic reason for your parents saying that? Because change is mostly limited to those situations in which the brain is in the mood for it. So when you sit up, what are you doing? You're helping your brain become alert so you'll take in whatever you need to take in to help change your brain. So what does this mean is that it means when you're in the mood for something. I used to do this all the time when I worked in the group home. I worked with roughly 12 boys, other boys as well, but specifically 12 boys at a time. And these 12 boys, they were mandated to see me. Do you know what that means? They were forced to see me. Do you know what that means? They didn't want to see me. Do you know what it's like being a therapist when your client is forced to see you? It's not fun. And I used to have to psych myself up every single day to go into that group home because I knew what I was getting. Oh, here you are. Great. Now I have to see you this week again. It's not fun when people don't want to see you. Now, I didn't always believe that they didn't want to see me, but it didn't make them look very cool to want to see a therapist. So they did this. But you know what I did before I went into the group home each day? I'd sit in my car, I'd pray, I'd do a little, kind of rocky boxing. Okay, Amanda, get into this. You're gonna go in there, have a good attitude, make sure that they know that you're happy to see them, even if they give you snarls and, look down on you and roll their eyes and everything. Because I knew, what would I be like going in there if I just responded to their reaction? Do you think that was going to make it any easier for me? No, so I had to pump myself up going in there because I don't want to change to be like them. I want them to change to be like me. But also, our brains change when the harder we try and the more motivated we are, the more alert we are, and the better or worse the potential outcome, the bigger the brain changes too. Now, why do I have a picture of King Tut here? Because many years ago, or several years ago at least, do you know that the King Tut exhibit came here? Does anybody remember what year? I think it was like 2008 or something like that. And it was also the same year that GYC was in Seattle. Does anybody remember that? And I was here, and I was trying to encourage one of my friends to come. This was before I was married. And I had a friend who I thought really needed to spend some time in a healthy spiritual environment, and I wanted him to go to GYC with me. So I was like, hey, if you come to GYC with me, and he was like, well, he knew the King Tut exhibit was here, and he knew that was something he really wanted to go to. And so I said, how about if you come to GYC with me, I'll go to the King Tut exhibit with you. Now, I am not as big of a history buff as some are, and I didn't understand why people got so excited about seeing a sarcophagus or some mummy, By the way, I found out it wasn't even King Tut. It was a replica. They don't take King Tut around. Did you know that? A little disappointing. I thought at least if I'm going to pay $30, I should see the real thing. Nope, it's not the real thing. So we're going through the thing, and I'm going, this is so boring. This is so boring. This is so boring. Why did I commit to this? And then I thought to myself, Amanda, there is something to learn here. It's just a matter of willingness. Are you gonna figure out what there is to learn here? So I prayed, and I said, God, there's got to be something that I could take from this situation. And guess what happened? I started going through that exhibit with a totally different mindset, and I came out with a bunch of things. By the way, if you ever want me to do a sermon on King Tut and the parallels between the Egyptians and today, do you know that there's a huge correlation between us? Do you know what all the Egyptian pharaohs did their entire lives? They prepared for their death. That's really morbid. But do you know what we're supposed to be doing our entire lives? It actually wasn't their death. What were they preparing for? Their afterlife. What are we supposed to be preparing our entire lives for? The afterlife. Did you know what all of the kings and pharaohs did during that time? They also prepared for their entourage to go with them. So when they died, everybody that worked for them, guess what happened? They died. They were killed to go with them into that afterlife. Now, I'm not saying we're supposed to be doing that, but we're supposed to be doing something very parallel to that. What are we supposed to be preparing for besides our afterlife? To bring people with us into that life too. And I started going, oh, this is amazing. I'm like writing copious notes in case I ever have to do a sermon on this. I've never had to do a sermon on this, but I have a sermon ready just in case. And my friend got through the whole exhibit and started walking backwards, and he's like, what's taking you so long? I was like, you have no idea how amazing this is. They spent all this time on gold and everything, but I asked for a spirit of willingness and motivation, and what started to happen, my brain opened up to be able to handle the information and even to use it too. So this is really amazing. But also our brain changes when what actually changes in the brain are the strengths of the connections of neurons that are engaged together moment by moment in time. So what do you notice from this picture? We have an ice skater. Have you ever watched the Olympics? What do the ice skaters do before they go out onto the ice? They all do the same thing if you watch them. They stand on the side and they're doing this sort of thing. They've got the music in their ears and they're doing this because what are they trying to do? They're rehearsing because Every step has another step attached to it. And the more they do that, the more the brain remembers it and is able to do it back. But how about this one? Learning-driven changes in connections increase cell-to-cell cooperation, which is crucial for increasing reliability. So what do we have here? Picture of basketball. Have you ever watched guys play basketball? Maybe women too. Have you ever noticed how while they're playing basketball, the players almost never look at each other, and yet they're able to throw the ball to each other, and they're all, passing and catching the ball. And they don't even look like they're paying attention to who's getting it to them, but they just know how to get it. Well, why is that? They're rehearsing it. They're practicing it before the game. And so they know little twitches of the person's body. They just catch it out of the corner of their eye. They know exactly what's going to happen. And this is how our brains work too. The more we do something, the more our brains are really quick and sharp to catch those things happening so we don't have to think about them. But this next picture, the brain also strengthens its connections between teams of neurons representing separate moments of successive things that reliably occur in serial time. So, how many of you shower the exact same way every single day? Do you know exactly what you first do in the shower, then the second thing that you do? Yes, you all do this, by the way. Or the way you brush your teeth, or you get your, warm drink ready in the morning, and that sort of thing. You're doing these things the exact same way every day, so your brain doesn't have to think through or think so hard because you're doing it exactly the same way. And that's what your brain also takes note of. And then initial changes are temporary too. And so your brain's always noticing the fascinating or novel things about what you're doing, and if they're important, good or bad. And so I just have a picture here because one of the things we do with kids is we give them chores to do when they're little, right? And then especially when a child is little and they're getting a chore to do for the first time, have you noticed how they respond to that chore? They get super excited. And so then they want to do that thing over and over and over again. Even if the parent is like, it's not effective, you're not cleaning it very well, let them continue to do it because you want them to develop the habit. And you also, parents, by the way, you also want to make chores exciting for the kid. If you walk around going, oh, I have to do this again, what do you think their little brain is going to register? This isn't supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be hard or treacherous or whatever. You want them to remember things positively. But also, the brain is changed by internal mental rehearsal in the same waves and involving precisely the same processes that control changes. I'm just going to cut to the chase. What do you notice this guy is doing? He's visualizing something. There was a story that I read years ago where a man had been a prisoner of war. He was a professional golfer, though. And when he was a prisoner of war, he spent many years in a box or a room or something very small where he wasn't able to play golf. So how do you think he passed the time? He would mentally rehearse playing golf like he was out on the course. He would think about the club that he would take. He would position the ball. He would hit it. He would watch it go. He wasn't playing golf. But when he was taken out of the prisoner of war experience, he was able to play golf like he had never left it. Because even visualizing something helps substantiate it in our minds too. But also memory guides and controls most learning. This is a picture of me, not me really, but I had trouble learning how to read. But the more that I tried, the more my brain would take certain parts of the things I had trouble with and would adjust and account for successes, throwing or discarding the negative tries that I had until I learned how to read certain things. And I could do that over and over again until I was able to learn. But one of my favorite ones is that if you learn something in one situation, your brain also takes that information and adapts it to another situation that's very similar. So this is just an example that happened to me when I bought my first house. I should say mortgaged my first house because nobody buys their first house. But these two pictures here show that, that weed whacker, the person who sold me the house, he was actually selling the house for his grandmother who had passed away. And he came over to show me, because it was an older house, and he wanted to tell me stories about all the times that he went to visit his grandma and different things about the house. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then afterwards, he noticed that my lawn was not kept because I hadn't had a chance to go get some of the things that I needed to take care of the house. Well, he tells me, I'm going to bring over my weed whacker if you want. I have this old weed whacker and you can have it. I thought, wow, I've hit the jackpot. I'm glad I waited. And he's like, well, the little trigger's a little finicky, but you can figure it out if you want to. So he brings it over, and the plastic weed whacker material, the string, was running out. And so he's like, well, I'll show you how to feed the string in there. He pulls out the thing. I'm not going to say what it is because I don't know the name, but he pulls it out and he starts winding it around. And I'm like, I know how to do that. It's like a bobbin on a sewing machine. I had no clue. I'd never used a weed whacker before. And he's like, oh, okay. So then he says, well, I have some electric cord too that I can give you because it was an electric weed whacker. And he says, I'm going to show you how to, wind it up so it doesn't get in knots. And he did something very much like this. Ladies, I guess gentlemen too, what does that look like? It's a chain stitch done exactly like if you crochet. Done exactly like if you crochet. And I go, I know how to do that. I felt like I took this guy's man card away. He was trying so hard to show me all these things. And I'm like, I know how to do that. I know how to do that. We shouldn't have such a hard time with some things. By the way, this is your note. Do not give up on learning something before you've actually learned it. Because there are a lot of things that when your brain learns how to do one thing, it takes that same information into another thing. And many times we have a lot more in common with things we don't think we know than we thought. And so this is just an example of that. Your brain will take certain things and connect them to others. And the last thing I want to share with you in terms of our brain changing is that, neuroplasticity, we think of it as a good thing. But there's actually a negative side effect of this too. And what that means is our brain does have the ability to get better, but likewise, it also has the ability to neuroplastically get worse, depending on what we feed on. And so the things that we take in, the topics, the subjects, whatever it might be, your brain can get better, but can also get worse. So whenever you hear somebody say, oh, well, it doesn't affect me, I cringe. Because everything we do affects us. Absolutely everything. You are either feeding your brain or depriving your brain of something. And so yes, neuroplasticity is a beautiful thing, but it does have some negative side effects if what we're feeding it aren't good. So I want to summarize the little things that we need to pay attention to. One, make continuous small improvements. There's actually a term called kaizen, and that's a Japanese term. It just means focus on the little things. Just go one step in the direction of where you want to go each day. It's the little things that we want to do. We don't want to ignore those little things. And start with a tiny step. Some people think, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do 3 hours of hardcore workout. And then what happens tomorrow? Oh, I'm in so much pain. I did way too much. So do one small step. Do you know one of the things I encourage my clients? Sometimes I say, all I want you to do is drive to the gym and walk through the door. Whatever you do after that is entirely up to you, but if you just go to the gym, just get yourself there and walk through the door, that will be a step in the right direction. And that's one of the hardest things for people to do is just get started. So that's what we want to do. And one of the other ways that we put this too is 1% better every day. Just 1% better every day. Number 3, we want to overcome fear and resistance by reframing and visualization. So when you think about exercising, if that's your New Year's resolution, don't think about, oh, I got to get up early. Don't think about, oh, I'm going to be in pain because my body's going to ache. Think about the after effect. One of my favorite things to consider when I was going to the gym was I want my legs to feel like tree trunks. Have you ever exercised and afterwards you're like, wow, they feel tight. Ooh, that feels real good. So what did I do when I didn't want to go to the gym? I want to focus on that tight feeling I get in my legs, that pat on the back that I'm able to give myself that I went to the gym. I don't want to focus on the other stuff. If you want to give up coffee this year, that's a great resolution. But what do people always do when they're giving up coffee the first day? Oh, what I wouldn't kill for a coffee right now. Look at all those people going through the drive-thru. They get coffee, I don't. Start thinking about, wow, I just saved $8.53. I just gave myself another day of clear thinking. By the way, caffeine doesn't make you more alert. It stops your brain from recognizing how tired you are. So it's like actually cutting off the messaging. The other thing too is you're also decreasing oxygen and blood flow to your brain by upwards of 30% when you take in caffeine. So you're operating off of maybe 70% blood flow and oxygen. That's why you get a headache when you stop drinking caffeine, because that blood flow and oxygen is going back at full force. And that's a lot of pressure on the head. But that goes away after several days. Number 5, celebrate small wins appropriately. Don't celebrate the fact you didn't eat sugar yesterday by eating sugar today. That's not appropriate. Number 6, cultivate patience. It's the journey, not the destination. Learn to enjoy the self-control that you're giving yourself. Learn to appreciate overcoming hard things, not just the end result. And 7, build supportive relationships. The importance of peers and peer pressure. If you want to do something, find people that do those same things. If you don't want to do something, find people who don't do those things. And then number 8, we also want to associate difficult things with the things you like. So if there's something difficult, maybe listen to your favorite music while you're doing your exercise or something. If you're washing dishes, maybe turn off the lights and play some classical music, light some candles around the sink, that sort of thing, so that you can associate something difficult with something good. So it's the little things. Pay attention to your bedtime. Pay attention to your diet, the people around you, academics, job, media, exercise, environment, thoughts, and especially trust in God. And I want to end with a couple verses. Well, first, a quote from Ellen White. At the command of Jesus, Peter was able to walk on the water, but he had to keep his eyes on the Savior. As soon as he looked away, he began to doubt and sink. Then he cried, Lord, save me. And the Savior's hand was stretched forth to lift him up. So whenever one cries to him for help, the hand of Christ is stretched forth to save. Why do I share this? Because so many times in our secular world, we like to talk about just pick yourself up by your bootstraps. But do you know who's the catalyst of all change? It's God. And that's why David asked God, create in me a clean heart, renew a right spirit, because it's God who really does the work. It doesn't mean we don't do any work, but it means that God's the one who puts the will in us to do these things, and we can multiply that. And 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The biggest change comes from being in Christ. The old has gone and the new is here. And I just want to end with a shameless plug for the Brain People podcast, a podcast that I'm a part of with 3 of my colleagues. And you can hear this and many more topics by listening to that too. We're on Apple, Tunes, Spotify, all those things I don't know about, and then YouTube as well if you want to actually see us.